What does reprimanding our children in front of their peers, relatives, other adults, other children that they might be in relationship with in some level, shape, or form, what does that do to them? What does that do to self-esteem, self-confidence, and how does it create and actually exacerbate the problem that you're attempting to address by reprimanding or discipline, quote unquote, disciplining them in public or in a place that, in public where you don't know the people, may not have as much of an impact on your children, but definitely in front of their peers, in front of relatives, in front of people they know. So when we reprimand our children in front of their peers, for example, and what it does is it creates the experience of shame. Now, that's not our intention as parents. It's not. It's like we just want to deal with whatever's happening in that moment, address it, hopefully come to some new collaborative agreement or solution with our child. We don't have the intention to shame our child. But the problem is that it can create shame in the child regardless, especially if they have if they tend to be more sensitive and their nervous system tends to perceive such a reprimand as a threat on their person. Yeah, because the amygdala will detect a threat, whether it be mental, emotional, psychological, or real physical threat, and determine the next move that they need to make. Here's the challenge. So if you're addressing, let's say hitting, but it's in front of peers, and we are not pulling them away privately to discuss what happened, we can end up exacerbating the problem. So the child is reprimanded or disciplined in front of others. The child recognizes this, and even if they're not physically looking around to recognize, hey, there's a bunch of people looking at me while my parent is disciplining me, the subconscious is registering it. The amygdala is registering it. The hippocampus, the different parts of the brain, is registering it and files that information away subconsciously. Now, if the child had the experience of a threat mentally, emotionally, psychologically on their person of being reprimanded, okay, I've just had the experience of shame. No child is actually thinking this, but I had the experience of shame. This is happening. It gets stored. That energy has to release. Now, when your child is being disciplined and reprimanded in public, or let's just say in front of others, there's going to be a need present, a need to either release a certain energy, express a certain energy. And you know how that comes out often? If it's coming through discipline or shaming, is it actually exacerbates the problem we're attempting to address. So if it's hitting, then that gets pent up as stored energy and comes out on somebody else. Let's say a sibling. Let's say you later on behind closed doors. Let's say it comes out through negative verbal expression. Let's say it comes out through sneaky behavior. Let's say it comes out through taking something that's not theirs, but it will come out because whatever that emotional experience is that's happening inside of them will need to be expressed. How does it get expressed in children? Through behavior. So what's one of the most effective ways to preserve our child's self-esteem and meet our own needs as parents, because we don't want the behavior to be exacerbated, when you need to talk with your child and quote unquote discipline, or I don't agree with reprimanding, but discipline them, pull them away. Not physically, not pulling them away, but I mean take them to a private place gently where you can talk in softer, quieter, low tones and attempt to address what's happening. Now, remembering that the state the child is in matters, you won't be able to reason with a child who's dysregulated emotionally. So first we're going to need to regulate, relate, and then reason. Yeah? The reasoning is like the last part when the brain's more regulated to be able to reason with that child. And that's why we want to do this not right there. It's not going to be very effective right there, and it can actually make your situation worse. So if you're attempting to address a negative behavior, you might end up creating more of the same negative behavior or different negative behaviors, because whatever that's happening inside of them will need to be expressed, and it comes out through behavior in children most often, and sometimes words, right? And other ways. Anyway, so really important. Where I see this happening for a lot of children, where they're being restricted from expressing themselves in this way safely, is violence and aggression as they become teenagers and adults. So this is why it takes root in childhood. This is why it's so important. If you're going to address a situation, a behavior that you don't agree with or approve of as a parent, let's take our child to a place where they can safely be addressed, without that threat of judgment from others, without the threat of self-consciousness, and let's discuss whatever we need to discuss in a safe, let's call it quote unquote private way, less conspicuous, I guess is what I'm trying to say, not out there in the open, in front of everybody. So hopefully that makes sense, and guaranteed that if you implement this as a practice, your child, as they grow, will have a much greater, for lack of a better word, respect for having done those things to support their self-esteem and their well-being.